Time to check in with Tom Mulcair. Our feature brought to you by the good folks at Guaranteed Industries. So if you're thinking about a cooling system, upgrading, even checking the one you have now, give them a call. They're a Lennox Premier dealer. That's Guaranteed, 514-342-3400 or online, guaranteedindustries.com. Tom, I want to start with, I guess, the Bernard Dranville story. And I guess the first question is, what is the CAQ doing welcoming an avowed separatist into their party?
You mean welcoming another separatist
another.
into the party?
Yes.
Because Caroline Saint-Hilaire, who was one of my buddies at the French TV station where I do a panel show, she is one of the most ardent, unrelenting, convinced sovereignists I've ever dealt with. She's so strong on that department, and I actually admire people who stick to their principles. She's running for François Legault, and his official line is, no, that sovereignty stuff, no, that's in the past. We're not in favor of that anymore. But I haven't heard her say that she's renounced sovereignty. I certainly haven't heard that from Bernard Dranville. And by the way, Dranville, of course, as was mentioned during the newscast, is the person who was responsible for the hilariously named Charter of Values, which, of course, went against all of our values in a fair, liberal democracy where you respect people's rights. But I digress. Let's just go back to the key point. And it was made by one of my colleagues who is a sovereignist on the French side. And he said, look, what is Legault's sales pitch now to the many federalists who voted CAQ in the last election? Because this just in, there were a lot of them. Well, the sales pitch came in the form of a hilarious set of one-sentence interviews that a series of CAQ MNAs gave into the cameras and into the microphones 24 hours ago, and they're saying, I'm a Québécois nationalist, but I'm also Canadian. And so every one of them had one of these lines. It sounded like that movie Elvis Gratton, where he famously tried to describe to an American what a French Québécois francophone Canadian, and it was one of those hilarious moments. Legault is being too clever by half here. He wants to hold on to the Parti Québécois vote that he got in the last election. His game plan, rile up the English-speaking community, attack its ability to get English health and social services, attack businesses by telling them that they could have language cops go in and seize their computers, on and on, remove the equality of English and French in the courts. And once he gets that reaction, he gets to look at the Parti Québécois voters who brought him in last time and say, you better stick with me. Look at the job I'm doing. I'm tearing apart the English CJAD system, for example. And at the same time, he's forgetting that he's got federalists who voted for him last time. And they're not going to vote for him this time if he keeps trying to, dance around with the sovereignists and try to play both sides against the middle. That's where he's being too clever by half. That's where he's going to get caught.
But in essence, Tom, the interesting part is you can agree that that's what he's doing. Then yesterday, when he was pressed by the PQ, by Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, to come out and just say that word because he's pointing in that direction, he refused to say it. So when is he going to change his mind?
And by the way, you can have staff prepare a 46-point press conference where you're going to try to cover complicated issues. Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon did something, I think it was spontaneous, and he got a bit emotional about it. And he just said, I'm inviting Mr. Legault to pronounce the word sovereignty. And believe me, it was picked up on the French side that Legault, of course, promptly ducked. So the game that's being played by the PQ is to try to talk to those same PQ voters from the past and say, don't trust this guy. He's not one of ours. He's a phony. So Legault keeps trying to shore up that side by bringing on board hardened, dyed-in-the-wool, unrepentant sovereignists to run for him. And at the same time, he's sending that message to the PQ. He's kind of forgotten about the fact that hundreds of thousands of dyed-in-the-wool federalists voted for him last time. And they're not going to be amused by what this guy's up to. People who care about Canada, Quebec's place in Canada, are not going to agree that, attacking the English-speaking community in Quebec the same way he attacked religious minorities, with the types of things that he's been doing, now showing his separatist side again, because he was, of course, a lifelong separatist. I think he's setting a trap for himself, and he's jumping into it.
Okay. A trap that could cost him the election? No.
Well, as things now stand, no, because he's in the Doug Ford driver's seat. I don't know if you saw it last night, Natasha, but there was an interesting little factoid. The Liberals in Ontario actually got a few more votes than the NDP, but the NDP got 4 times as many seats. And so the Liberals got 8 seats, the NDP got 31. So you can just see how the splitting up of the vote produces these weird results. The division of the vote was unbelievable in Ontario. Even the Greens were up in the over 6%. So when you get something like that, all of a sudden, it's impossible for another party to be able to get enough votes to take on. All that vote would have had to coalesce around Ford. Ford got 41%. That means that 59% of Ontarians didn't want Doug Ford, and yet he's got this smashing majority. That's our first-past-the-post system. That's the same system that will bring Legault to victory, I think, easily in the fall, unless things change radically. I think that the Liberals will easily hold on to official opposition status, but I can't see anybody, unless all of that vote, a lot of those Federalists come out of the CAQ and say, no, I'm going back to the Liberal fold, and maybe some of those PQ voters say, I'm going back to the PQ because I don't trust this guy either.
Okay, bringing it. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I was just going to ask you, in terms of the Ontario election where Doug Ford, as we anticipated, the polls told us that won in a cakewalk. The other story here, and I heard this talked about, and I wonder if this is going to happen in Quebec as well come October, the fact that you're still seeing people staying home. The vote percentage was down below 50% yet again.
43.5. It was the lowest voter turnout in Ontario election history.
Unbelievable. It really is it's a real source of concern for our democracy. We tend to take everything that we've got for granted. Yeah, we live in a free and democratic society. Who's going to take our rights away? Yeah, did you read Bill 21? Did you read Bill 96? These it's a democracy. Everybody goes out and votes. Yeah, but if people don't vote, then, who's got the most riled up voters? Well, that's usually going to be people with extreme views. And that's a good way to push them through. When Stephen Harper won his majority in 2011, 64% of those aged 18 to 30 did not vote. Young people just stayed home. They were discouraged about politics. They didn't bother to vote. Stephen Harper got a majority. And this is what happens, And so we've got to get people excited about the fact that we live in a country that is rare on this earth compared to all the countries that don't have democracy. And we've got to take care. We've got to cherish and take care of and nurture those democratic institutions.
Although, we were talking to Jim Meny earlier on, that Léger study out asking people what they thought about Bill 96. And what did he say? 1 out of 3 Quebecers have no opinion on this bill.
Well, it's because they don't follow it, because if it doesn't affect you, why would you follow it? And the other thing is, too, that was such a hilariously loaded question. I mean, now that the PQ is having a press conference saying, well, only 22% of Quebecers think that Bill 96 goes far enough. Well, how many Quebecers are going to say that the French language is just fine and you don't need to do anything more to protect it? I mean, it was a completely comically loaded question. In fact, I was a bit surprised that Léger actually accepted to put it into a poll, because they really have top-notch people. There is such thing as a scientific poll. And if you ask such a comically skewed question that essentially suggests the answer, you can't call that serious polling.
Tom, I'd really like to know what you think about the education minister coming out and saying, oh, yeah, you think private English schools, you think you can have a plan to bypass CJAD and to, circumvent Bill 96 by offering this grade 12 program. No way, Jose. What do you think of that?
Well, I'm anxious to see what Kuiper Academy decides to do. And I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to simply completely ignore him. Because, by the way, one of the reasons that school exists is because it doesn't take 1 penny from the Quebec government. Bill 101 doesn't apply there. So what, they're going to sort of retroactively decide that somehow Bill 96 applies there? I don't think so. If they want to teach grade 12, which would give them better access straight into university, let them go ahead. By the way, the universities will be the ones to decide whether that grade 12 is enough of an opener, but it would probably work on the Ontario side. So way to go, Francois. You're working hard to make sure that your better students pick up stakes and just head for Ontario, which is what's going to happen.
Yeah, but you can't prevent that from happening. So why stick your nose into this? First of all, it's not the public system, Tom, as you said. It's the private system. If you want to send your child to grade 12, because they're either going to leave the province at some point or go to university without going to CJAD, that's ultimately your decision. Why is the government getting involved?
It's the CAQ. They're not. They're just talking. They haven't actually done anything. This is just Robert's yakking. And what he's doing is he's trying to, again, shore up that side. He's trying to shore that up for to hold on to the Parti Québécois voters. So he didn't want a headline saying, oh, looks like there's a workaround. He's got to say, no, we're not going to let this happen.
I see.
Looks like the Assembly's about to adjourn for the summer. You haven't got a slightest piece of legislation before it, and you don't have the regulatory power to do it. Good luck, buddy.
Last question, Tom, before I let you go.
Wait, I just got to say, I love that. Like, Robert's just yakking away. I will give him that. That is one thing he's very good at, Tom. As for being education minister, meh.
Meh. Yeah, go look at the mildew laboratories that are our public school buildings, and you know how much we care about it.
The mildew laboratories, okay?
Well said, well said.
Tom, let me just ask you this, just off top of my head. You know, we had another note today saying François Paradis is not going to run in the next election. Can you remember the last time leading up to either a provincial or federal election where so many sitting members decided not to run again?
Well, there is a reason for it, though, because in the past, let's say, you were halfway through your term, you had an offer in the private sector, you would just pull the plug. But there's this system in Quebec City. Once you get 2 months' salary for every year you've been a member. So after 6 years, you've acquired the maximum 12 months of full year's salary. And it's a big chunk of change. And so and it also, it helps build your pension and all that. But after a couple of people took that money, and there was one guy famously took the money and then immediately ran federally and got elected, but he still got 1 year's salary, which is supposed to be like transition pay, to help you go take courses and stuff like that. And so everybody said, okay, this system sucks. We won't allow this anymore. But what they did is they threw the baby out with the bathwater because, people with legitimate reason to want to move on and do other stuff, they're being barred from it. So if they wanted to cash in that full year's salary, they had to stick around to the end of this term. That's what's at play here. That's what's going on.
Okay. Tom, thank you very much. You have a good weekend.
Great to talk. All the best. Have a good weekend,
All right.
Natasha, and let us know about the power failure.